My name is Lauren Tucker, and I am an assistant professor in the special education department at Southern. And the frame at which I'm presenting is really important, as Fred shared, because I'm a little bit unique when it comes to assistive technology specialist, because my background is in special ed. So I was a special ed teacher before I became an AT specialist, and I'm currently still practicing. And so I've encountered a lot of very interesting experiences with virtual learning and assistive technology for students with autism. And I wanted to share some of the resources and challenges and tools with you today. So here's our roadmap. I wanted to provide a brief background on assistive technology and the framework that we utilize in the field and talk about how it's shifted given the COVID pandemic and some of the challenges that we are encountering. And then I want to go through and we'll look at examples of assistive technology, some of the tasks or challenges that some of our students might be encountering at this point in time, and tools or strategies to then address them and implement. So I'm really excited to get going. At any point in time, if you have any questions, if you would like to share anything, have a comment about a tool or a way that you've used it, please feel free to add it in the chat. I have it open so we can kind of have more of a fluid dialogue throughout the presentation if that works best for you. I wanted to start off with looking at the legal definition of assistive technology in IDEA. And so legally, you can see that the federal definition really emphasizes what the technology does. And that's something that I believe is somewhat of a misconception in the field. It kind of gives it a bad rep, because the automatic assumption is that assistive technology is high tech and expensive. And nowhere in the legal definition do you see the focus on high tech. And one of the things that I really emphasize with a lot of teams is that assistive technology is a continuum. So we can have low tech, mid tech, and high tech. Even something as simple as a pencil grip can be considered assistive technology for a student as long as it increases, maintains, or improves the functional capability. And that's the heart of the definition and the legal definition of assistive technology is increasing, maintain, or improving. And what is really unique about the situation at this point in time is that functional capabilities of our students are really fluid right now because environments are changing, routines are changing, and new challenges are being encountered. And so that's something that sometimes our frame and the tools that we're using do need to be shifted just as fluidly as some of our learning environments. And I'll talk more about that today as we continue on. But I really wanted to prime the session today that some of the tools I'm going to be talking about might be free, might also be low tech, and it all is under the frame of assistive technology, as long as we focus on that function, increasing, maintaining, and improving the functional capabilities. The other framework that we utilize in the field is something called the SET framework. And this, because assistive technology, there is no certification to become an assistive technology specialist. We don't have very strict guidelines from the federal flow down in terms of how to conduct an assistive technology assessment. And so in the field, we have quality indicators to ensure that we have high quality practices and supports. And one of the approaches is utilizing something called the SET framework. And Joy Zabala created the SET framework and continues her research within this particular field. But what it does for us is it ensures that we focus on the student first. It can be really easy, especially in the field of technology, to become enamored with technology. When the iPad came out, it was such a cool device, and we immediately tried to give it to many students. That's an example of focusing on the technology first. What the SET framework does is it brings the student's needs and the individual to the forefront. And so we kind of look and we really outline what are the students or the individual strengths and weaknesses in a wide variety of areas. We look at daily living, we look at academic areas, and then we look at the environment in which the student is functioning. What is unique about our current pandemic right now is previously we really primarily focused on the school setting. We looked at school academics. Where we looked at home was when we were addressing communication, but now we have two environments that we need to look at for learning as well. So what is the student functioning like at school, possibly in in-person learning? And also, what is the environment like when the student is at home and virtually learning? And so that's something that the SET framework now is really adapting to our current times and is really helpful for teams to then analyze what tools and supports do we need to provide for the at-home learning environment, because we have so much more of that happening at this point. The next T stands for tasks, and that allows us to really break down the academic or the daily living tasks that the student needs to complete. Whether it's writing a sentence to summarize what they just read, being able to complete a math exam, or being able to ask effectively for help. And so identifying those essential tasks are crucial for us to match the appropriate technology for our students. And then finally, after we've analyzed all of that, we look at the appropriate tool to then support the student across the process. I can tell you that it can be very tempting to start with the tool and try and fit our students or our individuals' needs to that tool. And it can often lead for lack of implementation or not using the tool. And so taking this approach and focusing more on the individual and the person first really does help us to make sure that the tools and the technology that we are implementing are going to support the student and accomplish the goals that we're looking for. And so now I've referenced some of these, but these are just some of the COVID-19 challenges that I've encountered with my students. I'm sure this list could go on, but I wanted to just highlight some that are really relevant to assistive technology. Really, the unpredictability. I think we're all experiencing this. I had no idea what my life was going to be like today. Was there going to be a virtual learning day, a snow day with no school? And so our students with autism are really feeling the same things that we are, is that there is this extreme unpredictability. And using some assistive technology tools can help at least have a plan or a roadmap to then get ready for what are the options that might happen. And that's something that is really important to provide, where we're giving some stability within the unpredictable. The consistent change in routine. I know with my daughter with virtual learning, almost each day we've got some different time schedule with the Zoom, what class she needs to go to. And so that can really be very disruptive for many of our students with autism in their learning, in not having this consistent routine. The variable learning environment as well. Is there a quiet space at home? Am I learning from home? Am I now all of a sudden in quarantine? We do have a lot of changes within the learning environment. The new snow days, I think this new phenomenon is interesting, whether it's a true snow day or a virtual learning snow day, because some of our students really might have loved previous snow days and had that relaxation. And now we've got this change where schools are converting to virtual. And so getting ready and again, prepping for that change. And just the disruption in family life, in home, in school life, whether or not a teacher or a staff has to be out or be quarantined. There are so many disruptions that are happening for our students. Assistive technology can provide the support so that the anxiety or the stress is not increased when it comes to the challenge that they're encountering with their academics. So I just wanted to link some resources for the pandemic and COVID-19, and I'm going to try and vary the resources for the continuum of needs for our students with autism. So there are definitely, I'm going to try and give some communication resources, but also some academic resources. So no matter what students you are supporting or the frame at which you're coming at my presentation, I hope my goal is for everyone to at least be able to take something. I wanted to share these two specific resources that really came out at the beginning of the shutdown. Who knew that they would be just as relevant a year later? But the first one is Mr. Clay, and he is a speech and language pathologist who publishes a wide variety of videos and YouTube videos that focus on core language modeling for AAC users. I love the way he breaks down concepts And so this one, he really does talk about wearing a mask and gloves and breaks down what it might feel like to see adults with masks, and reassures. He uses a lot of core vocabulary words within his description, and you can see that they appear on the side of the screen. So it's really modeling some of the symbol support for some of our communication users to then help reinforce. For this particular video, he focuses on safe, face mask, breathing. And so he really does have a lot of great vocabulary and communication supports embedded within his videos, and he publishes them quite a bit. The other one that I liked is the NPR actually put out a cartoon about the coronavirus again back in March. However, I thought they did a really good job of trying to associate kind of some of the terminology that our students might be hearing. And so this one, I took this screen grab because they just talked about how kids are getting the coronavirus, however, it's generally mild, and they associate it with mild salsa. And so really trying to give a barometer, making that personal connection for our students to then help associate what it means by mild, and to really just to support our students in understanding of what's happening in the world around them. These are just 2 resources that I pulled out, but really do kind of support our students in understanding the world around them and how it's changing. Oops. So I showed you, the communication and a visual support. What I wanted to highlight today are some options for teams or parents to be able to create custom material. And that's what we know about for many of our students with autism, is creating that individualized content for them and being able to create either a set of expectations, a routine, is really powerful to make sure that it is individualized. What I found has been really helpful is providing that predictable options. So, okay, it's going to snow this morning. So you might have a snow day with no virtual learning. You might have a virtual learning day. You might have a delayed virtual learning, and providing some of these visuals to then support what that might look like, where it's still unpredictable, but at least we're providing that routine and consistency in the unpredictability. So the first tool that I wanted to highlight is something called Lesson Picks. And if you are familiar with Boardmaker or some of the PECS symbols that many of our students utilize, Lesson Picks is similar. However, it is much more accessible. It is only $36 a year. And here's an example of a symbol supported expectation list for online learning. So you can edit the symbols. It's a very easy tool to make low-tech supports for our students, again, providing a visual schedule or a visual set of expectations to support our students within the COVID environment that we're working within. Another great symbol supported tool is something called Widget Online. What I like about this particular tool, it is a much more open platform. And what it does is any text that you copy and paste into the program, it provides symbol support. So just like you might see symbol supported text, it will do this for any custom material. So if you wanted to kind of share a mask policy or create a unique social story for for your student, you can create that with Widget Online, and it provides symbol support for each word. So you don't have to manually do it, which is very helpful for many teams and many students. I know that I've used this a lot when I'm modifying classroom material. So if the regular education classroom is reading an article about the Olympics, I can create custom symbol supported text using Widget Online. It's a really flexible platform, and it's $7 a month, but there is a free trial available as well. So I just provided some examples of what we could create this custom material. So looking at clear expectations, task list, or a visual story can be very powerful. So I gave you 3 tools, so Lesson Picks and Widget Online. The last one is Book Creator. This is a really popular tool in many K-12 schools at this point in time because it's very flexible to create interactive materials, but you can also print them out. So you can add a picture, you can also add text. And again, it really does allow us to create custom supports for our students to prep them for whatever they might be encountering. And so now I'm going to transition a little bit into the academics that we might be encountering within the pandemic. And I'm going to try and frame them through the tasks that our students might be completing or might be encountering. And so we'll look at virtual learning tasks and situations, and then I'll break it down really by the academic areas. So a reading, writing, and then a math tasks. One of the things that I'm noticing a lot with the students that I'm working with is that the impact of virtual learning is that they might really show that they can do something at school and within the school environment, but it's not always generalizing into the home environment. And what I'm finding is that many students who might not need auditory support of text, might be able to read by themselves at school, need that support at home because there's so many competing variables for them when they're learning at home, that just becomes a barrier for their learning. And so what I'm finding is that I'm working with a lot more teams to create an increased use of tools for virtual learning because there's so many other factors that are becoming barriers and obstacles for our students to engage meaningfully. So it really is, we're functioning in a new environment. So we need to kind of evaluate that a little bit differently when it comes to the tools that we're using. Motivation, I'd say, is one of the biggest things with virtual learning. I know I'm encountering that at home with my children, and this is something that can be a real challenge. And so when we look at from the teacher standpoint and from the parent standpoint, how can we then increase that motivation to get through and persevere through some of the virtual tasks, especially those that can be more challenging? So really thinking about, can we identify a reinforcer? And as the teacher, can we identify that reinforcer for the end of my instructional session? So really thinking about, can we watch a fun video? Can we play a dance game? Can you show me something from your home environment? And that's been really powerful. And providing a task list. I know for me, this is an organizer that I've created to really kind of outline the expectations for the day. This is something where we've got the schedule for the subject area. And then what was challenging is that not only did you have to attend the class, but then you had to complete the corresponding work that went with it. So this was one iteration of a work organizer to help my daughter complete her work. And she had to complete each of the assigned work afterwards, which was a real barrier. To kind of feeling like I'm done and I want to be over it. So it was helpful for her to kind of have this motivation. The other tool that I highlighted here on the side, this is something called ChoiceWorks. And this is an iPad app. And I love the flexibility within this particular tool. You can see here it's $14.99. And I gave an example of, this is a visual timer. And what I used this for is that it frames, I am learning, and then it gives the visual as to how long class is. So in this particular instance, class was 30 minutes. Although it says while I'm waiting, but what I used this for is the reinforcer of the choice after class. So at the end of class, you can play blocks or you can earn candy, or the two options after class. So what I liked about this is that it provides that visual green so that the concept of time doesn't become a barrier. I can see when the green is done, I know that I'm almost there, and you can custom set this time to be as little or as long as you would like. ChoiceWorks also has visual task list where the student can click and drag to then finish visual tasks. So for $14.99, it provides a nice virtual option to support our students. I also included, so if you were interested, I put a link to the presentation in the chat. I'm going to put it in here again for you. So you can download the PDF for this presentation. And this right here is a link to this token board Google Slides template. So this is a really very simple token board. Again, something that we generally use in a low-tech way in our classrooms. However, just converting it to a Google Slides one. And sometimes it's just being able to change that. So I can put stars in as the student completes a task and put a picture of the reinforcer or embed the video right there. So the student always has that visual reminder as to what they get at the end of virtual learning. I know this has been really powerful, depending on the platform that the student is working in. I use something called guided access consistently in my practice. Apple has done an amazing job to build in accessibility options for students and individuals who use their platform. What guided access does, it has the ability to lock an individual in an app. So for example, if a student needs to practice in a particular app for a certain amount of time, or they are joining a virtual class, joining Zoom on an iPad, and they tend to leave the Zoom, what guided access allows you to do is lock them in. So you can see, and this is a little kind of movie that shows guided access. So when you lock it, you set a passcode, and no matter how many times they try and hit the home button, they can't get out of the app. You can also set a time limit now, which I really like. So after the 15 minutes of practice, they can then earn and the app will unlock and they can then have access to the whole iPad or iPhone. So that is a really powerful tool, a really good one to share with parents as well. Because I know for me, transitioning back and forth from virtual learning and free time or home time can be a real area of contention. And so this allows it to kind of be a non-negotiable option where you have to do learning on your iPad right now. And so this is, again, such an amazing tool that's built in to iPads and iPhones. The other area of challenge, especially when we're looking at being at home, is transitioning away from break time. And so many of our students will utilize the iPad as a reinforcer. So whether we're watching YouTube videos, we're playing a game, it is that reinforcement or the recreation. And for many students, transitioning off of that, and if they're using the same device to now virtually learn or to access content, it can be a very challenging transition for many of our students. So what I love in iOS, there's a built-in timer on an iPad or an iPhone, and when you go into when the timer ends, there's a whole bunch of different sounds that you can choose. If you scroll all the way down, there's this option called stop playing. And I discovered this way too late in my iPad using life. But what the stop playing does is it locks the iPad at that timer. So now there's no negotiation of, I just want to get to the next level or one more minute before I go to math class. What this does is, as long as you have the passcode on the iPad and the student doesn't know the passcode, it then locks it for the student. That might cause another set of behaviors, but depending on the individual that you're working with, it can alleviate some negotiation that you might be encountering. And I find that this is really helpful for many students because it just closes it and then we move on to the next activity. The other thing that I find is I'm encouraging a lot of teachers to utilize is online virtual timers. Even our sense of time and time organization and management can be very impacted in virtual learning. And so this is a link to a wide variety of online visual timers for our students to then kind of know what is about to happen. I know if we're taking a break, having the visual timer shared on the teacher's screen so that our students know what time they're coming back to class or what time they're signing in. So using these visual timers can really be essential to, again, helping with those transitions that in our home environment can be much more challenging for our students. Next, I'm going to transition to writing. And this task, I think, especially in a virtual learning environment, can be very taxing for our students. And I think because everything that we're encountering oftentimes now in school and virtually is all typed, it is all writing. For many of our students, it's now becoming a much more of a barrier and an obstacle. And so this extensive writing and typing can cause a lot of fatigue or resistance to complete the task. And there are many built-in supports that can be very powerful for our students. The first one that I want to emphasize, because many of our students are using Chromebooks to access, is using the speech to text on the Chromebook. So Google Docs has built-in voice typing, so our students can speak to the computer and it will type for them. but I will tell you that it is a separate skill. Talking to the computer is much different than talking to an adult who is dictating for you. And so that's often what is a challenge for some of our students, is they have the scribe accommodation, and it doesn't necessarily translate easily to using speech to text because it's a different skill. What I've had a lot of success with is I work with my students who are using speech to text and giving them this visual task list to support the skill of dictating as they're using it to convey their understanding. So here, the keyboard shortcut to use speech to text on a Chromebook is the search and then the D key. And so here I have that up here. And then now I really reinforce and prompt my students, think of your full sentence with punctuation, speak slowly and clearly with a strong voice, and say punctuation. I find that really practicing and prompting students through this increases the likelihood of an accurate transcription to then lower the frustration tolerance, to increase frustration tolerance, because many of our students, when it's not writing the right thing, get very frustrated and kind of dismiss the tool quickly. And so using this process and this protocol increases their amount of success so that they accept the tool better. So then hopefully they can get through more work. So there's also dictation on the iPhone or iPad, and it really can be very helpful. One of the things that I do want to just point out on this slide, for many of our students using Chromebooks, something to note is that Chromebooks all have lowercase letters on their keyboards. So depending on how you're accessing or joining me today, take a look down. If you're on a laptop, you most likely have capital letters on your keyboard. So if you look at the letter D and the letter P and the letter Q and the letter P, I'd said that already, they're all uppercase, which are very easily to visually distinguish. On a Chromebook, they are all lowercase. So the B, the D, the P, and the Q are all the same letter, just rotated differently. And for some of our students, the addition of that need to visually discriminate this similar looking letter causes a big barrier for typing. Oftentimes, if we have students with autism who also have a lot of reading challenges, this can cause an additional layer of fatigue and exhaustion in accessing and typing, because now I have to think and possibly flip that letter around in my head before I type it. An easy solution is there's very cheap keyboard stickers to add capital letters onto Chromebooks. But I will tell you that it is it can be a big obstacle for some of our students. So I like to point that out when I have this visual here, because the lowercase b and d can give a lot of challenges for some of our students. The other tool I wanted to highlight is Grammarly. This is a reading and writing support tool that works in Google Chrome, and it will work on top of everything. I use this every day in my professional life. And for some of our students who have difficulty with spelling and grammar, it is much better than the Google Docs spelling and grammar support. So I will often pair speech to text and Grammarly together to increase the support and the success in writing for our students. The other thing we might be encountering, as I mentioned, is that reading is very laborious. Our students who now previously had oral directions for a class assignment might now be required to read those directions. And depending on how the teacher is promoting it, if there's a video explanation or an audio explanation, if there's not, our students are required to then read a lot more than they previously have. And providing a support to then reduce that mental load is really important. So there's one of my favorite tools, and probably the most popular tool that I have students using today, is something called Read and Write for Google Chrome. It is a paid tool. However, the free version will read any text out loud on any website. So I have a visual over here. This is a Google document that I have, and here's the toolbar up here. You can see the majority of them are grayed out. However, the play button and the stop and the pause all still work. What I love about this tool is that it highlights the sentence it's reading and it highlights the word that it's reading in blue. So it's providing the visual cue so that the student's not getting lost and it's reading it out loud. It will read any website or any document for a student. So again, providing these options and to really reduce some of the cognitive load our students are having to utilize just to access an assignment can be really powerful. An iPhone and an iPad will all do the same thing. So I have some screenshots here and links to instructions on how to set that up. But if a student is accessing school or anything on an iPad, they can also listen to it as well. What I've also found is that now modifying curriculum is becoming even more important because students are accessing many lessons or materials at home, and having that modified content for parents to access as well is really important. So this, one of my favorite tools, I've got a lot of favorites on this one, so let me start with one. Rewordify is really fabulous because what this tool does is it actually takes challenging words and it replaces them with simpler definitions. I am going to show you an example of this, so I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment and show you what it looks like on the website. All right. So here's the website Rewordify. You can see here it says you can copy and paste any text into this box. So let's say my students are learning about the Alien and Sedition Acts. Many of our social studies classes are focusing on primary source documents and having a lot of this original language for our students to access, which we know can be very challenging for our students who are looking at abstract language and symbolism. So I'm just going to copy this text on this website and I'm going to paste it into Rewordify. So all I did is copy and paste, and I'm going to click on this Rewordify text option. You can see now what it's done is it has some highlighted options. And so here you can see and it says person from another country or form of life from another planet. When I hover over it, it then shows me that it took the word alien out and it replaced it with this definition of the word. So you can see that sometimes it can cause more challenges for some of our students who might really focus on the one definition of alien and their association with alien. So what is nice is that if we want to make sure that this content, they're truly engaging with it and not being distracted by some of the vocabulary, I can manipulate this text as the teacher and take out alien, take out form of life from another planet, and it's already given me the easier definition. So it allows more flexibility and efficiency in modifying content for the teacher or for the team or for the parent. You can see here, it took sedition and it replaced it with anti-government crime. And so it is an algorithm, so it automatically takes words out, so it might not be perfect. However, it's a nice start to reduce some of the vocabulary that our students are encountering if it's a barrier for them. As I scroll down on this website, I just want to highlight a couple of other options. What it also allows you to do is you can actually change how it's laid out. So it by default highlights the simplified definition and you hover over it to get the original vocabulary. What I really like, I call this like the no fear Shakespeare option, is it gives the original language on the left side and the simplified language on the right side. So now our students are being exposed to the original and they have a more accessible version as well. And again, thinking about the set framework and putting the student first, for some of our students, this could be more confusing, but for others, having that access could be very powerful. Finally, what I also love is that for our students, it's important to not just restrict the understanding or the exposure of this tier 3 vocabulary. Knowing that there are 2 definitions of the word alien is important. However, we don't want it to impact their exposure or their access to the content. So it will automatically create activities with the vocabulary taken out so that the student still knows that what sedition is, but again, it's not impacting their access to it, which is very important. All right, stop there and switch over to my PowerPoint. Okay. So that was Rewordify. The other, the next tool that I want to emphasize or share, this is more of a resource compiling, is the Paul V. Sherlock Center on Disabilities. What they've done is they've created an entire library of adapted literature and adapted science lessons. And I included a picture. So if you're familiar with the children's book, A Bad Case of the Stripes, which is a very popular children's book for elementary age, you can see here that it's got the original picture of the book. However, on the bottom, it's not only simplified and modified text, but it's symbol supported as well. Not only do they have picture books in this library, but they also have novels. So we can provide exposure or support for our students with autism to the grade level topics or books, titles that their classmates are reading, but modified for increased access for our students. I had a student that I worked with in high school who was included in his regular education English class, but a lot of the themes and the abstract language were really challenging for him. So he would engage in the regular ed classroom, specifically Huck Finn was a challenge for him. He read what the class read, but he then also had a modified version of Huck Finn as well that he was able to access on his own that simplified some of the language so that he can try and get back some of the symbolism and understand what was happening in the text. And so these modified supports can have a wide function within a classroom for a student to support them. So I gave an example of a storybook, but like I said, they do have novels, they have Call of the Wild, Romeo and Juliet, that are all, not only is it modified in terms of what they're sharing, but also it's symbol supported. Flowcabulary is a fun website. I don't know, I'm going to age myself, but if you know Schoolhouse Rock, or if you were familiar with Schoolhouse Rock in school, where it had a variety of different learning supports put to music, right? Conjunction, junction. And so Flowcabulary does the same thing, but primarily with hip hop and pop. So there's a lot of visuals and supports. For some of my students, it is way too stimulating, but for others who are very motivated by music and engagement, it actually does exactly what they need. So again, thinking of the student first, that particular tool can really help engagement with virtual learning. So that's Flowcabulary. Oops. The other challenge that when it comes to virtual learning that I've really struggled with, I'd say as a parent at home, is just managing technology, passwords, and schedules. But this is another area of frustration, of anxiety that our students can encounter when they're learning at home. And so really either supporting families or creating a way to kind of help streamline this is really powerful. So thinking about saving passwords, adding visuals on devices. I have some students that have their schedule really put right on the bottom of their laptop so that they know exactly what time their Zooms are. So it's right there on their Chromebook. Using a calendar. So I have an example of our virtual learning calendar that are embedded. All of the Zoom links are embedded right there. And I have reminders that pop up. Bookmarking websites. So at school, we can kind of try and get ahead of this to then help facilitate the virtual learning experience for our students and for parents. I know for me, one of the tools that I've used at home a lot that I've recommended to other families is I use smart home technology to help set reminders So for me, we have an Alexa at home. So even right now, my daughter's got like 2 virtual learning classes. And so it will remind. So it kind of pops up and it says like, reminder, you have to log into morning meeting. That verbal cue for her, she knows to then go log in. And that has been really helpful because now I don't have to provide that verbal prompt. I don't have to keep organized the ever-changing schedule. So that's something that even if you have it in the classroom, or you can recommend that for parents if they have it available, again, is just one way to ease the anxiety and this disruption of virtual learning to then help families facilitate it as well. And I think that's something that is, we're all in a heightened level of stress and anxiety. And so any strategy to help make things a little bit easier, especially for our students to then meaningfully engage with learning, is really important. Math is the other real big challenge because now math has become digital, and math does not like Microsoft Word and the horizontal nature of documents. And so this can be a real challenge for kind of that virtual learning access. And I know many of my students really just feel like, well, I can't show my work on this tool. I can't show my work in math. I'd say one of the most popular and the best tools to combat this challenge is a tool called Kami. And many schools are using Chromebooks. And so Kami is a Chrome extension that allows a student, you can see here, they can highlight, they can write, or they can draw on a PDF document. And so many math worksheets are PDFs. And because the writing and the drawing is free form, they can insert their images or their text anywhere. They're not restricted by the platform. The other thing that I've been using a lot for many of my students is the premium version allows you to add an audio comment. And so many of our students really emphasize the use of mental math, right? I did it in my head for our students who are very good at math and don't want to explain their thinking. So much of our math curriculum now is, tell me about the strategy that you used. Which way did you do it? And many of our students are really reluctant to use that and really share their thinking and elaborate. The voice comment feature allows them to record their voice and to just say how they solved the problem and send it to their teacher. So it takes the writing barrier out of math and it allows them to then separate so it is just math. And I have quite a few students using that feature within the comment option. And it's been really helpful to provide that flexibility where they can just speak how they found their answer and their teacher can understand their thinking better, especially when they're learning at home. SnapType is an amazing app on the iPad or iPhone that allows you to take a picture, any worksheet, and you can add text onto it. So if you're at home or if you have a family at home and they have printed worksheets, which I think these are now endangered, we're not really using a lot of printed worksheets anymore. However, it allows you to then add text pretty much anywhere on a device and it gives you free form. And whew, I feel like I went very fast through that, but provided, hopefully, as I said, depending on whatever student or audience that you are working with, you were able to take something away. I did want to share, we have an assistive technology graduate program at Southern. And so if you are interested in getting more information or kind of knowing what particular trainings the assistive technology program is offering, this is our website here, or you can also scan this QR code and sign up to kind of get any of our updates. But does anyone have any particular questions or challenges that you've encountered with assistive technology or virtual learning? And you can feel free to unmute or you can type in the chat. Great, Stephanie. Thank you so much. I'm glad that that was I'm glad it was helpful. I do feel like I had so much to cover that I think I just went too fast because I got too excited and I was worried to run out of time. Oh, you're muted, Fred.
Apologize, I was trying to be quiet. Can I just ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
One of the things I find, there's so many claims in the autism world for apps. There's like hundreds and hundreds of apps that claim they're useful in autism. I think there are 2 published papers that show they're effective. Can you talk about, is there sort of is that true for other aspects of technology, that there's a big gap between what people have tried and what the evidence is?
Yes, the evidence-based. And so that's what I think is really challenging when we look at the evidence-based shows that technology-aided instruction is beneficial. However, it doesn't outline this app is research-based, right? And so really looking at, that's when it comes down to focusing on the student, right? And looking at what are the aspects of the student, the strengths and weaknesses. I will say that there are some particular, I'd say more of the reading supports, some things that I didn't look at, like Lexia, which is a systematic phonics program that actually has an evidence base to it. They use research-based practices and evidence-based scope and sequence in order to teach reading. However, many of the tools don't have a solid, strong research base behind them, really because technology is moving so quickly and changing. And especially with the pandemic, we have a boom. But what we do have is the evidence-based behind how are we integrating them and how are we using them, right? And so that's where I think a lot of the visually supported tools, like the a visual schedule, right? We know that there are best practices and that is a helpful support for our students. There's a research base behind that. And what the assistive technology can do is make that process more accessible and accessible in virtual learning and make it more customized for our students. But I agree, it's a challenging area because there's little to no research on the specific programs, yet many of them do have some bold claims when it comes to marketing. Even Apple does a very good job of marketing to the field of autism, and how they make bold claims. I guess I'll just say that. Good. Any other questions?
Lauren, thank you for sharing some of those really kind of like those everyday strategies that you can just use very easily in terms of like printing the calendars and accessing Google Calendar to kind of schedule your kids' days at home, because that's really helpful and available for everyone, through Google Classroom and with their meets. It's really important to just kind of emphasize what are those strategies that are right there at our fingertips already without having to access all of these extra devices or resources. So I think that's really important. So thank you.
No, and that's one of the things that I think, especially when we look at supporting families, because I think that's really where a lot of the stress is coming right now.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much unpredictability, and adding another tool, right? Adding a separate website to log in, as Kim said, can really be a barrier for many students and families. So as much as we can build in that universal approach, this is what Google Calendar, so let's just use it in a different way, can be really powerful. But I found that the parent strategies are huge, because that really can then set the tone for their learning environment at home to then help them be more accessible to whatever instruction they're getting. And that really is, seems like is going to stay, right? We're going to have virtual learning snow days for probably the very near future. And the rest of the world.
Yeah, I have 2 learning at home right now with Alexa timers going off and visual timers dinging for every event today. And I'm still late a little bit of the times, but at least it helps.
Right, it does.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I apologize that I ended a little bit early, but I appreciate all of you spending your Friday morning.
Thank you. This was a great talk. Thanks very much. We'll see everybody next month.